What was the weirdest rule you had to follow in school? In elementary school we were not allowed to stand in circles because standing in circles leads to the gang life.
N.
No high fives. In fact, no contact with one another whatsoever. This was in middle school. The staff was tired of watching kids groping each other, I imagine. No same-sex hugging. Really weird rule. Apparently some kid got sick, and their parent blamed same-sex hugging. As a teacher, I had to make this rule. Underwear must be worn on hall. Oh, this was for college students. Edit. To clarify, underwear must be worn when sitting on the school's chairs during class. And it was because of a male student. Edit 2. No luck finding the costume on my own. Started a level 1 daughter thread for help finding it. In my old primary school, their solution to every playground accident was to put a fence up. Child tripped on a tree root, put a fence around the tree. Child slipped on some mulch in the garden. Better set up a 6 feet high perimeter around the entire garden. Oh, what's that? Someone pushed another student off of a bench high ledge. Let's put up spiked stockade style poles to prevent that from happening again. It got so out of hand with so many playground restrictions the parents started insisting the removal of most of them. Bonus. The children's name for the principal was Mr. Pennison. In secondary school, high school, we were forced to leave the school in full uniform at the end of the school, meaning no jackets, unless you were out of the main gates, which are very far outdoors, so if it was raining you were fricked. Thank God that rule only lasted 2 weeks. In middle school we weren't allowed to clap during assemblies, because the vice principal thought it was too disruptive. We could only do jazz hands. This seems like a rule that was made up just because it was secretly hilarious to watch a room full of teenagers do simultaneous jazz hands with deadpan face expressions. The 6-inch rule. We weren't allowed within 6 inches of another person. 1. We aren't American. We don't use inches. 2. How could you stop hundreds of students from being close proximity to each other? 3. You're making a rule for adolescent teenagers, called the 6-inch rule. Hilarity ensues. Forced to use a hair straightener for naturally curly hair. In Japan, curly hair was not allowed. No stomping on soda cans laying on their side and walking around with them attached to your shoes. No running in the schoolyard or playground during recess or lunch. How TF do you expect to stop 500 children from running while they're out there playing? I had the opposite. Run as much as you want, but don't stay still. Monitors bothered me so much with that. I didn't want to move too much when the ground was in ice, because once a kid was sliding a patch of ice, bumped in my legs, and made me fall pretty hard on my head. I ended up in the hospital for a neck injury. I was in pain for 2 weeks, and now I hurt my neck very easily. It's not like I was fat or didn't move around every other time. They didn't allow the boys to have door on the bathroom stalls in high school. They let teachers use those bathrooms. Nothing like walking in on your 300-pound history teacher dropping a deuce. The same rule was enacted in my high school for 2 weeks. It had to stop after a large group of boys would get together during class and wander from bathroom to bathroom finding people who were taking a poop and then yell, clap, cheer them on for pooping. Because of gang affiliations, we were banned from wearing 3 items of red or blue. Things got a bit hairy on school spirit days, where they encouraged us to wear our school colors, red, white, and blue. Not really a rule, more of a, if this isn't illegal, then it should be sort of thing. Someone emptied all the soap in the boys' bathroom onto the floor my freshman year, and the school retaliated by leaving the dispensers empty for the next 4 years. It was disgusting. Travel soap kept in my bag through high school. Way back in elementary school we weren't allowed to walk around the school in groups larger than 3 because it intimidated the primary grades like fricking what? My school dates back to the 13th century, so we had some archaic rules still floating around. My personal favorite was that the head boy gained the right to grow facial hair and graze his sheep on the headmaster's lawn. I had severe kidney problems when I was in secondary school. The rule was that when we were in the yard, you couldn't leave the yard until break/lunch was over. Like they literally locked the gates to stop you from leaving once in the yard. I had multiple arguments with teachers for not letting me go to the toilet. then getting beached at in classes for asking to go or being late. In high school, skirts were to be no shorter than 12 inches off the floor. People wandered through the halls measuring. We had a lesson about how fire needed oxygen to continue burning. So, they said a fire would eventually go out if in a contained room with no extra oxygen. Our teacher then assigned a different student every other week to be in charge of making sure all the windows were closed before leaving. If there was a fire, thankfully, we never had an actual fire. No playing with kids in another division. Dividend. 1 was grades 1 to 3 dividend. 2 was grades 4 to 6 dividend. 3 was grade 7. 9 people in dividend. 3 in most of dividend. 2 didn't pay attention to dividend. 1. But when I was in grade 4, all my friends were in grade 2. Nobody was a jerk to a younger kid just because they were younger. Some of us had siblings in another division. I ignored the rule since it wasn't enforced much. My high school started to do a school shooter drill twice a semester my senior year. They had a dude come in the front door during lunch, blow an air horn and shout, "This is a shooter drill, run." He had a water gun and would shoot kids with it and then tell them they had been killed. Me and my friends casually finished our lunch as he shot us, then left out the kitchen side door to leave the building. Half the senior class ended up leaving as they had this guy go through half the school and through the freshman center over the course of half an hour. It was pretty ridiculous and happened several times, usually during lunch. When I was in elementary school, we had a rule that kids were strictly not allowed to touch rocks. No rocks. Not pebbles. Not big rocks. No rocks. I got put in timeout a few times for touching rocks. The problem was, our playground was built on a pebble pit. If you fell or wanted to sit on the ground to play, you could very well be singled out and punished for touching rocks. It was a huge tattlefest too. Kids would catch others touching the rocks and run to tell the pet coaches, who would immediately interrogate you. Did you touch rocks? Tell me the truth. I found a really cool rock in first grade and decided to show it to my coach. I told her it looked like an alligator's skull. She smiled at me, took the rock, and chucked it as far as she could, then bitterly told me, "Don't touch rocks. If you kept touching rocks, you'd be made to walk around the playground in circles sometimes, until you had sufficiently learned your lesson." I once walked in circles with a few other kids until playground time was over. It felt like forever, but it was probably like 15 minutes. TL. Doctor, my school had a don't touch any rocks rule. Edit for those asking. As far as I know, they never told us why. Maybe they had a good reason, I don't know. All I know is that rock touching was forbid. I used to go to a K-12 charter school, and you weren't allowed to take left turns. Is your next class to your left? Nope, sorry, you have to walk right all the way down to the end of a hallway before you start back towards your next class. That whole school was backwards. No band shirts at my Christian school, but the only ones that would be recognized were Christian bands. So you could get away with almost anything else. Red Hot Chili Peppers. That into cooking? When I was in high school, the phrase epic fail was a thing. One of my teachers became sick of it and banned it. It was quickly replaced with catastrophic error. Cold dance, show our shoulders, or play games on school campus. School dances were sit-down meals instead, as we were not allowed to dance. God is against dancing apparently. There was silent time in the lunchroom in Catholic elementary school at the beginning of lunch, ostensibly for prayer/grace. I remember sneezing due to allergies and having to miss recess. Never forgave those freaking nuns. All the girls have to keep their hair short, which was nothing new in a nation school. Strangest variation on the fact was that the dance club girls could all have long hair, but as soon as they finished their last dance competition, they are required to cut their hair short too. We had an assembly in middle school one time that was interrupted by a teacher. Apparently, a parent was there to pick up their child, who was currently sitting in the auditorium watching the assembly. The teacher grabbed the mic from the stage and said, "Dale Smith, I don't remember his last name. Will you please exit the auditorium?" Nobody stepped forward. Nobody stood up. We soon all realized that Dale wasn't there. Before the staff could comprehend what was happening, the entire auditorium was yelling Dale's name. lifting up seats and causing a ruckus looking for him. It lasted for a good 20 minutes. We never found Dale. And we never gave up. Every assembly we had at that school from that point forward started off by every single person in attendance shouting Dale's name and making sure he was there. Dale went from an unknown nerdy kid to a king. Everyone knew Dale. Everyone had to make sure Dale was there. As a result of this, a No More Dale campaign began, and anyone who started looking for Dale during an assembly was punished. I went to a private school ran by Seventh-day Adventists. From a religious context, the rule wasn't that dumb, but they banned students from bringing any food that isn't kosher for lunch. I got around that by bringing tofu, bacon and pepperoni. High school: no backpacks, no leggings. Girls must only wear minimal makeup, no lipstick, no colored hair. As if anyone listened, nothing with a skull, weapon, or allusion to death may be worn. No plain colored shirts, shoes, bandanas, etc. for fear of color gangs. God forbid the green gang gets us. Women must adhere to a strict dress code. Fingertip length garments, no tank tops of any kind. No vests. No backless garments. No visible bra straps. If the edges of your bra could be detected from the outside of your shirt, you got detention. No sweatpants or any kind of pant with an elastic waistband. Men may not sag pants. Sweatpants were permitted. No bandanas or do-rags. No physical contact of any kind. No hugs, hand holding, kisses, high fives, fist bumps, or anything including physical contact. Pants may not have more than 4 pockets. This goes for both genders. No chain wallets. No purses. No wandering the halls before school began. No cell phones may be permitted on the property at any time. Bringing a cell phone at all resulted in phone being taken and not returned to you or your parents. Phones were smashed or tossed into the pond. Once in the lunchroom, leaving the lunchroom at any time until lunch was over resulted in detention. This included no bathroom breaks. Middle school, all of the above, but also had assigned seating in lunch. There were more, but this is just what I remember off the top of my head. Our middle school picked a yearly motto to symbolize the spirit of the year. One year, it was just because you can, doesn't mean you should. They translated it into Latin and everything, and printed it on flyers all over the school. Not exactly a rule, but it was both weird and completely useless. It was entirely unclear what it meant to both staff and students. Was it in reference to drugs, homework, going into an app vs regular class, having sex? Edit. To add that it was made even more ridiculous by the fact that our school's mission was a Virgil quote, "They can because they think they can." So the full year's statement was they can because they think they can. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
N.
I've told this story before, and 20 years after the fact I'm still not happy about this. In any case, when I started high school, the entire school was open campus for lunch. That year, however, some of the sophomores were acting up off campus, so our principal, in his infinite wisdom, decided that starting the next school year it would be open campus only for juniors and seniors. Think about this. The sophomores, who caused the trouble, who then became juniors, and therefore this rule didn't apply to, weren't punished, but us freshmen, who became sophomores and weren't the ones causing the problems, were punished for what they did. So, I had open campus my freshman, junior, and senior years. It was closed my sophomore year. Still think that was unfair. For a while in elementary school, we couldn't run on the playground. The teachers were probably worried that the older kids would plow over the younger kids. These see-through backpacks, tucked-in shirts, and stupid name badges that could only be worn with a clear lanyard, because God forbid somebody show up to school with a Raiders lanyard. Our school got divided up into these houses, and form time home or room to Americans was previously decided by year grade to Americans, and suddenly got mixed up into multiple years in one form. They thought it would encourage unity among the different years of kids, but instead you just ended up with a classroom of kids divided into little groups of their friends and 4 assemblies a week. They're still trying to make the system work, but from what I heard, the old system was fine. In elementary school, break was split into 2. 25 minutes for lunch, 25 minutes for recess. But, during lunch, we had to be silent. It wasn't a religious school, it was a private one. We had to be absolutely quiet, and if someone spoke too loudly the whole grade got in trouble, had to either miss half of recess or all of it. Looking back, I don't know why we had to be quiet. It was a ref-king school, not a funeral. Our elementary school had a staircase which can only be used by teachers. Nobody knew why, but some of my classmates were punished for going down it. In my elementary school, we weren't allowed to go inside during recess, except to the bathroom. They had a door that led directly onto the field for a maximum of 5 minutes. The rule doesn't sound too outrageous, except this was in Canada, where it would frequently get to -20°C -4 freedom units. We also didn't get indoor recess until it reached -25°C -13 freedom units. We couldn't say bathroom. We had to refer to it as the comfort station. Before I describe what actually happened, I need to explain something about weeples. Weeples are, or were, at the very least, these little balls of fluff about the size of golf balls. They're often festooned with googly eyes, hats, plastic feet, or any number of other accessories, making them look rather like a crafting project undertaken by a group of 5-year-olds. Weeples were fairly coveted items when I was in 6th and 7th grade, because you could earn them as a reward for selling magazine subscriptions through this fundraising event that the school held every year. And if you had the right weeples, you actually had the chance to win a fair amount of money in one of the daily contests. If none of this is making much sense, don't worry, it was difficult to understand back then as well. Basically, you'd get different varieties of weeples for selling different amounts of magazine subscriptions. Then, every day, each weeple bearing student would be allowed to pull a piece of candy out of a hat. If the candy had a sticker on it, the student would win a certain amount of money. That amount would be multiplied by each weeple that they owned, plus an additional multiplier for. Okay, you know what? None of this is important. What is important is that certain members of the school faculty viewed this entire event as a way of threatening or bribing some of the students. There was one young woman, for instance, who was told that she'd be set up to win $50 if she gave up her spot in some contest or another, so that the teacher's son could take her place. Another student was told that his winnings would be confiscated if he didn't take responsibility for the fire alarm having been pulled. Nothing really terrible happened, at least, nothing that I heard about, but there were enough shady dealings to make the entire thing seem pretty damned unpleasant, even for those of us who weren't really involved. The twisted punchline to the whole affair came about when one student offered another a sexual favor in exchange for his weeples. And when folks found about the deal, only he was suspended. Not, as you might think, because of his involvement in the exchange, but because it was explicitly against the fundraiser's rules to share or give away weeples. TL. Doctor, keep your fuzzy balls to yourself. Not being able to hug. Listen, I get the whole no PDA thing, okay? That's fine. I don't want a bunch of nasty assholes licking on each other in the hallway. But explain to me why the hell I can't have a nice hug with someone. Maybe I'm having a shoot day. Maybe they're having a shoot day. But nope. Had teachers out there who saw you hugging in school suspension. She was crying, you raggedy ass fat old bitch muffin cunt face. But seriously, no hugging is some shoot. We had one-way hallways one year in junior high because it was overcrowded and they thought that might make movement between classes more efficient. They had teachers in the hallways between every class to make sure you didn't go the wrong way, even if your locker was like 10 feet the other direction. Super inconvenient. Edit. Wow, my first 1K comment. Guess all those extra laps around the school were worth it in the end. In middle school there were upstairs and downstairs, meaning you can only go up the upstairs and down the downstairs. There would always be aides or teachers or whatever watching the stairs to make sure no one went the wrong way on the stairs. 2004, 2008, my sophomore year, we had nearly 10 bomb threats. At first we would evacuate and school would be cancelled. By the third or fourth one, they evacuated us to the track field and we would be corralled in there for hours till the police cleared the threat. One time, I was in gym when we evacuated, wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt on a 50-degree day. FCK those guys. My junior year, we weren't allowed personal water bottles. So many kids were sneaking vodka into school and getting drunk that they started requiring freaking doctor's notes to carry a water bottle. If you didn't have one and needed to drink, you had to use your hall pass to go to a fountain. You got 5 slots per month on that hall pass. My 8th grader has a teacher that has her desks set up in a circle facing each other. She is so OCD the kids get in trouble if they do not walk around the room in a clockwise fashion when going to their desks. Truly mind-boggling. So many weird rules to follow. Let's see. In middle school during class, if we were going to speak, we had to stand up. A pain in the butt during the few months I had a broken tailbone. Our cheerleading skirts could be no shorter than 3 inches above the knee. Quite dangerous when doing stunts, and could possibly be how I broke said tailbone. We were not allowed to dance, and therefore we did not have a prom. Our formal dresses for homecoming had to be brought in and tried on in front of women faculty members to be sure they were appropriate and not too scandalous. Girls were not allowed to wear pants, even on very cold days. That's all I can remember at the moment. In my school, students were not allowed in the school library unless we had a signed and dated pass from a teacher that said which books we were allowed to access. Mind you, our collection was so out of date that the encyclopedia's entry for Mars stated that the red coloration is likely due to native vegetation. Don't go into the forbidden forest unless you get in trouble and then are punished by having to go into the forbidden forest. My junior high did not allow backpacks. They adopted this policy right after Columbine. They told us it was because the hallways were too thin and this would help with maneuvering through the halls. It was total bullshit.